The fluorescent lights in Dr. Martinez's waiting room buzzed overhead as I sat thumbing through a magazine, waiting for my routine checkup appointment. At 58, these quarterly visits had become as predictable as the seasons. I was early, as usual, enjoying the quiet moment before what I expected to be a simple blood pressure check and medication review. That's when I heard Sarah's voice drifting from the reception desk, speaking in hushed tones to the nurse. Sarah Chen had been my closest friend for over 12 years, ever since we met at that community gardening club. We'd shared countless coffee dates, supported each other through life's ups and downs, and I trusted her completely. So when I caught fragments of her conversation, my blood ran cold. "I'm really worried about Margaret," Sarah was saying, her voice carrying that tone people use when discussing someone fragile. "She's been talking about suicide constantly. Just yesterday, she mentioned how she doesn't see the point anymore. I think she needs immediate help." Before I share this shocking experience, please show your support with a like and subscribe. Comment your location below. My name is Margaret Stevens. I'm 58 years old, and I felt the world tilt sideways as those words sank in. Sarah was lying. Boldly, completely lying to medical professionals about my mental state. Yes, I'd been going through a difficult period since my early retirement, feeling somewhat lost and adjusting to a new routine. But suicidal? Never. Not once had I expressed anything remotely close to that. I sat frozen in that uncomfortable waiting room chair, my magazine forgotten in my lap as Sarah continued her performance at the front desk. The nurse was nodding seriously, making notes on what I assumed was my file. My heart hammered against my ribs as the implications crashed over me. This wasn't just gossip or a misunderstanding. This was a deliberate attempt to have me hospitalized. "Mrs. Stevens?" The nurse called my name, and Sarah turned around, her face arranging itself into a mask of concerned friendship when she spotted me. "Margaret! I was just telling them how worried I've been about you," she said, approaching with arms outstretched for a hug. "I hope you don't mind that I came to speak with Dr. Martinez. I just care so much about your well-being." The audacity left me speechless. She was doubling down, right to my face, while orchestrating what could only be described as a betrayal of the deepest kind. I managed to nod stiffly, my mind racing as I tried to process what was happening and why. When I finally made it home that afternoon, after an incredibly awkward appointment where Dr. Martinez gently probed about my concerning statements, I immediately called my daughter Jessica. Jessica Stevens Miller had always been my anchor, the one person I could count on for complete honesty and unwavering support. At 32, she'd inherited her late father's practical nature and my stubborn streak. "Mom, slow down," Jessica said when I launched into a frantic explanation. "Sarah told your doctor what exactly?" "That I've been talking about suicide, that I said I don't see the point anymore." "Jessica, I never said anything like that. Not to her, not to anyone. I've been feeling a bit aimless since retirement, sure, but I've never expressed anything that could be twisted into suicidal ideation." The silence on the other end stretched long enough that I wondered if we'd been disconnected. "Mom," Jessica finally said, her voice tight with controlled anger. "This is serious. If she's making false statements to your healthcare providers, that's not just friendship drama. That's potentially dangerous." I sank into my kitchen chair, staring out at the garden Sarah and I had planned together just last spring. The irony wasn't lost on me that the person I'd trusted with my vulnerabilities, my occasional loneliness and adjustment struggles, had weaponized those confidences. Later that evening, I found myself pacing the living room when my neighbor Tom knocked on the door. Tom Richardson had been a godsend since moving in next door 3 years ago. A retired teacher with a gentle manner and sharp intuition, He'd become both a trusted friend and the kind of neighbor who noticed when something was wrong. "Margaret, I hope I'm not overstepping," Tom said, settling into the chair I offered him. "But I saw Sarah leaving Dr. Martinez's office today when I was picking up my prescription. She looked quite pleased with herself. And then when I saw you come out later looking upset, well, I couldn't help but wonder if something was amiss." I found myself telling Tom everything, grateful for his calm presence as I worked through the shock of Sarah's betrayal. He listened without judgment, occasionally asking clarifying questions that helped me piece together the timeline. "The thing is," I told him, "I keep trying to figure out why. What could she possibly gain from having me hospitalized? We've never had any serious conflicts. I thought we were genuinely close." Tom was quiet for a moment, his weathered hands folded in his lap. "Sometimes people create crises to position themselves as heroes," he said finally. "Or sometimes there's something they want that becomes easier to obtain if you're not in the picture." His words sent a chill through me as I began to consider possibilities I hadn't wanted to face. And that's when the pattern snapped into place. The next morning brought an unexpected revelation when Jessica arrived unannounced, her usually composed demeanor replaced by barely contained fury. She had that look I remembered from her teenage years when she'd discovered something that violated her strong sense of justice. "Mom, I've been thinking about this all night, and something doesn't add up," Jessica said, declining my offer of coffee and heading straight to the kitchen table where we'd had so many important conversations over the years. "Sarah's behavior, the timing of everything. I need to ask you something, and I want you to really think about your answer." I settled across from her, noting the determined set of her jaw that reminded me so much of her father. "What is it, sweetheart? Has Sarah shown any unusual interest in your finances lately? Your house, your retirement accounts, anything like that?" The question hit me like ice water. I sat back, memories suddenly reshuffling themselves into a disturbing new pattern. "Actually, yes. She's been asking about my will, claiming she's updating her own and wants advice. And she's mentioned several times how much work this house must be for me, how I might be happier in one of those senior living communities." Jessica leaned forward, her voice dropping to that careful tone she used when delivering bad news to clients. "Mom, I think we need to consider that Sarah might have a financial motive here. If you were declared mentally incompetent and hospitalized, and if she somehow positioned herself as your concerned friend, helping with your affairs?" The implications made my stomach churn. I thought about all the times Sarah had offered to help with my paperwork, her insistence on having copies of my house keys for emergencies, her frequent comments about how isolated I was without family nearby. "But Jessica, that's so calculated, so cold. We've been friends for 2 years. She was there when I was grieving your father, when I felt lost after retiring. How could someone fake that level of care?" My daughter reached across the table and took my hands, her touch grounding me as it had since she was small. "Some people are very good at playing the long game, Mom. And honestly, your grief and transition made you vulnerable in ways that someone like Sarah would recognize and exploit." A soft knock interrupted us, and I saw Tom's familiar silhouette through the front door glass. Jessica and I exchanged glances as I let him in, both of us recognizing that his timing suggested he had more to share. "I hope I'm not intruding," Tom said, though his expression suggested he had important information. "Margaret, I did some thinking after our conversation last night, and I remembered something that might be relevant." We gathered in the living room, Jessica taking her usual spot on the couch where she'd done homework as a child during visits. Tom settled into the chair with the careful movements of someone choosing his words deliberately. "About 6 weeks ago, I was gardening when I overheard Sarah on her phone in your backyard," Tom said. "I wasn't intentionally eavesdropping, but she was speaking quite loudly. She was talking to someone about property values in the neighborhood, specifically about what your house might be worth if it went up for sale quickly. Jessica and I exchanged sharp looks. Did she say anything else? Jessica asked. She mentioned something about timing being important and about how sometimes people need help making decisions that are best for them, even if they don't realize it initially. Tom's expression was grim. At the time, I thought perhaps she was trying to help you with estate planning or something benign. But given what you've told me about yesterday's events, the pieces were falling into place with sickening clarity. Sarah's increasing presence in my life, her subtle suggestions about my mental state to mutual acquaintances, her offers to help manage my affairs. What I'd interpreted as friendship had been manipulation from the start. We need to document everything, Jessica said, shifting into her professional mode. Mom, I want you to write down every conversation you can remember with Sarah about your house, your finances, your emotional state. Tom, would you be willing to write down what you overheard? As we began planning our response, I found myself marveling at how my perception of the last 2 years was completely rewriting itself. But I also felt something I hadn't expected. Relief. The nagging sense that something had been off in my friendship with Sarah, the feeling I'd dismissed as paranoia or ingratitude, had been my intuition trying to protect me. There's something else, Jessica said quietly. If Sarah's been planning this for weeks or months, she probably won't stop with one failed attempt. We need to be prepared for her to escalate. Tom nodded gravely. People who go to these lengths don't typically give up easily when their first plan fails. As if summoned by our conversation, my phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. So worried about you after yesterday. Coming over to check on you this afternoon. We need to talk about getting you the help you clearly need. The three of us stared at the message, and I realized our real confrontation was just beginning. Jessica immediately took charge. Don't respond to that text yet. We need to set this up properly. She moved to the window, checking the street view. Mom, do you have any recording capability on your phone? I think so, but I've never used it, I admitted, feeling suddenly old and unprepared. I'll show you, Jessica said, settling beside me on the couch. Her closeness reminded me of when she was small and would lean against me while I read to her. Now she was the one guiding me through unfamiliar territory. The key is to let Sarah talk. People who are manipulative often reveal more than they intend when they think they're in control. Tom shifted forward in his chair. I should mention, I've been keeping a bit of an eye on things since I overheard that phone call. Sarah's been by your house at least twice when you weren't home. I saw her looking in your windows. The violation of that image hit me hard. Why didn't you say something earlier? Honestly, I wasn't sure if you'd given her permission. I know she helps you sometimes, and I didn't want to seem like a nosy neighbor. Tom's regret was evident. I should have trusted my instincts. Jessica reached over and squeezed my hand. We all should have. But Mom, I need to ask you something difficult. Looking back, can you see how Sarah positioned herself in your life? I closed my eyes, thinking. She showed up right after your father's funeral. Said she understood loss because she'd been through it too. She seemed to know exactly what to say, what I needed to hear. And then, she started coming by more often, always with a reason, bringing food, offering to run errands. She'd make comments about how big the house was for just me, how much work it must be. The pattern was becoming painfully clear. She'd ask about my finances, but in a caring way. Said she was worried about me being taken advantage of. Tom nodded grimly. Classic isolation technique. Make you dependent on her while making you doubt everyone else. Including me, Jessica said quietly, and I heard years of hurt in those two words. I turned to face my daughter fully. What do you mean? Mom, for the past year, you've been distant with me. Every time I'd call, you'd mention something Sarah had said about adult children who are too involved in their parents' lives, or how independence was important for your mental health. I started backing off because I thought that's what you needed. The realization hit me like a physical blow. She was driving a wedge between us. Very effectively, Jessica said. I started questioning whether I was being overprotective, whether I was smothering you. Meanwhile, she was positioning herself as your primary support system. Tom cleared his throat. If I may, I think Sarah underestimated your relationship. When Jessica showed up at the hospital yesterday, it clearly caught Sarah off guard. She couldn't control the narrative anymore. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Sarah. I know you're probably confused right now, but that's part of why you need help. I'll be there in an hour. She's not asking, Jessica observed. She's telling you. Because she thinks she's already won, I said, surprising myself with the steadiness in my voice. She thinks I'll be so grateful for her concern that I'll go along with whatever she suggests. Will you? Tom asked gently. I looked around my living room, at Jessica sitting protectively beside me, at Tom, who had overcome his own uncertainty to warn me, at the photos on the mantel showing decades of genuine relationships. No. I won't. Good, Jessica said. Because I have an idea, but it means you'll have to confront her directly. Are you ready for that? Before I could answer, we heard a car door slam outside. Jessica moved quickly to the window. It's Sarah. She's early. Jessica's voice was tight. Mom, she has a folder with her and she's not alone. There's a man with her I don't recognize. My heart started racing, but then I felt Tom stand up behind me and Jessica move closer to my side. For the first time in months, I wasn't facing Sarah alone. The doorbell rang, followed immediately by Sarah's voice calling out, Margaret, it's me. I brought someone who can help us figure out the best next steps for you. I stood frozen for a moment, my mind racing through everything we'd just discussed. The old me would have opened the door immediately, apologizing for keeping Sarah waiting, ready to defer to whatever she thought was best. But looking at Jessica's concerned face and remembering Tom's courage in coming forward, something fundamental had shifted inside me. Don't answer it yet, I whispered, though my hands were trembling. I need a moment to think. Sarah's voice came again, more insistent. Margaret, I know you're home. Your car is in the driveway. We really need to talk about what happened yesterday. Jessica moved away from the window and sat back down beside me. Mom, you don't have to do anything you're not ready for. We can ask them to leave. No, I said, surprising myself. I need to face this, but I want to understand what I'm walking into first. I looked at Tom. You said she's been planning this for a while. What do you think she's really trying to accomplish? Tom rubbed his forehead, clearly uncomfortable, but committed to helping. Based on our conversations, I think she genuinely believes she knows what's best for you. But Margaret, the way she talks about you when you're not there, it's like you're a project rather than a person. She's mentioned things like managed living situations, having someone oversee your finances, limiting your independence for your own good. My stomach dropped. She wants to control my life completely. I think so, yes, and bringing someone with her today suggests she's ready to take concrete steps. The knocking resumed, sharper now. Margaret, I'm not leaving until we talk. This is too important. Jessica's jaw tightened. The entitlement in that statement is incredible. I stood up, feeling something I hadn't experienced in months. Clarity. You know what? She's right about one thing. This is too important. too important for me to let her manipulate me into decisions I don't want to make. "What are you thinking?" Jessica asked. "I'm thinking I want to hear what she has to say. But on my terms, not hers. With both of you here as witnesses." I looked between Jessica and Tom. I need to understand exactly what she's been telling people about me, and I want her to know that I'm not as isolated as she thinks. Tom nodded slowly. "You want to call her out directly?" "I want to have an honest conversation about her behavior. If our friendship means anything to her, she'll be willing to have that conversation. If it doesn't, then I need to know that too." I walked to the door, Jessica and Tom flanking me. My heart was pounding, but for the first time in months, it wasn't from anxiety. It was from determination. I opened the door to find Sarah standing with a man in his 50s wearing a suit and carrying a briefcase. Sarah's expression immediately shifted from impatient to relieved. But I caught a flash of something else when she noticed Jessica and Tom behind me. "Margaret, thank goodness," Sarah said, stepping forward as if to come inside. "I was so worried when you didn't answer right away. This is Dr. Martin. I asked him to come speak with you about some options that might help." I didn't step aside to let them in. "Sarah, I didn't invite anyone over today, and I certainly didn't ask you to bring a stranger to my home." Her smile faltered slightly. "Well, no, but after yesterday's incident, I thought it was important to act quickly. Dr. Martin specializes in crisis intervention and can help us determine the best course of action." "Us?" I repeated. "What decisions do you think need to be made about my life that involve you making them?" Sarah glanced nervously at Jessica and Tom, then back at me. "Margaret, you're clearly not thinking straight right now. That's exactly why I brought Dr. Martin. He can provide an objective assessment." "Based on what information?" Jessica interjected. "You weren't even present for whatever incident you're referring to." Dr. Martin stepped forward. "I understand there's been some confusion, but Ms. Sarah has shared some concerning patterns of behavior that suggest immediate intervention might be beneficial." I felt my anger building, but it was clean and righteous, not the confused spiral I'd been living with. "Dr. Martin, I appreciate your concern, but any patterns you've heard about came from someone who has been systematically isolating me from my family and other friends, while positioning herself as my only reliable support system. Did she mention that part to you?" Sarah's face flushed. "Margaret, that's simply not true. I've been trying to help you because no one else seemed to notice how much you were struggling." "Really?" I stepped back and gestured for Jessica and Tom to move closer. "Tom, would you like to share what you told me about the conversations you've had with Sarah?" Tom straightened, clearly nervous, but resolute. "Sarah has been telling people, including me, that Margaret has been talking about suicide and that her family doesn't care enough to intervene. She said Margaret was becoming increasingly unstable and that someone needed to step in before something tragic happened." "That's because it's true." Sarah's voice rose, her composure cracking. "Margaret, you have been depressed. You have been talking about feeling hopeless. I was trying to protect you." "By lying to my doctor? By telling people I was suicidal when I never said anything of the kind?" My voice remained steady, but I could feel the weight of months of manipulation behind my words. "Sarah, when exactly did I tell you I was considering suicide?" She opened her mouth, then closed it. "It wasn't. You didn't say it directly, but the implications were clear. You talked about feeling like a burden, about wondering if anyone would miss you. Those were conversations about feeling lonely and disconnected. Conversations that happened after you'd spent months convincing me that Jessica was too busy for me, that Tom and others were just being polite when they invited me places, that I was becoming a bother to everyone in my life." Dr. Martin was looking between us with growing confusion. Miss Sarah, you told me there was an immediate crisis situation. This sounds more like a friendship dispute. Because it is a friendship dispute, Jessica said firmly. One where my mother's so-called friend has been systematically undermining her relationships and mental health, then using the resulting isolation and depression as justification to take control of her life. Sarah's mask was fully slipping now. You don't understand. Margaret needs structure. She needs someone to make sure she's taking care of herself. She's been making poor decisions, forgetting things, becoming increasingly dependent. Dependent on you, I said quietly. Which was the point, wasn't it? The silence stretched between us, broken only by Dr. Martin clearing his throat uncomfortably. I think I may have been brought here under false pretenses. Ms. Margaret, do you currently have any thoughts of harming yourself? No, I don't. I never have. I've been sad and lonely, partly because I allowed someone to convince me that the people who love me were pulling away from me when they weren't. Sarah's folder crumpled slightly in her grip. Margaret, you're making a mistake. You're not seeing this clearly. Without proper support, you're going to end up in real crisis, and then where will you be? Surrounded by people who actually love me, I said. People who want to support me without controlling me, who encourage my relationships instead of undermining them, who listen to what I actually say instead of interpreting everything through their own agenda. For a long moment, Sarah stared at me as if seeing a stranger. Then her expression hardened into something I'd never seen before. Fine, she said sharply. But don't come crying to me when you realize you've thrown away the one person who actually cared enough to do something when everyone else was content to let you spiral downward. She turned and walked toward her car, Dr. Martin following with obvious discomfort and confusion. I watched her go, waiting for the guilt and second-guessing to hit me. Instead, I felt lighter than I had in months. But as Sarah's car pulled away, I noticed she was on her phone, gesturing angrily as she spoke. Jessica noticed too. Mom, she said quietly, I don't think this is over. Jessica and I stood in the medical building parking lot, watching Dr. Martin drive away with a bewildered expression still on his face. The afternoon sun felt warm on my shoulders, but I couldn't shake the chill from Sarah's final words and that angry phone call she was making. Who do you think she's calling? Jessica asked, voicing my exact worry. I don't know, but knowing Sarah, she's not going to just accept this quietly. I pulled out my keys, my hands still trembling slightly from the confrontation. She's probably already working on her next move. Jessica walked me to my car, her protective instincts clearly on high alert. Mom, I think we need to talk to Tom about this. He should know what Sarah's been doing, especially if she tries to contact him with more lies. The mention of Tom's name brought a fresh wave of clarity. You're right. God, Jessica, how many conversations has she poisoned? How many times has she made me second-guess perfectly normal interactions with him? That's what people like Sarah do, Jessica said, leaning against my car door. They isolate you gradually, so gradually that you don't even notice it's happening until you're completely dependent on them for your sense of reality. I thought about all the times Tom had invited me to things, and I'd declined, convinced by Sarah's subtle comments that he was just being polite. All the times I'd cut conversation short because Sarah had made me feel like I was being a burden. I've been such a fool, I said. No, Mom, you were being manipulated by someone who's very good at it. There's a difference. Jessica squeezed my arm. The important thing is that you recognized what was happening before it was too late. As we drove home separately, my mind kept circling back to Sarah's phone call. By the time I pulled into my driveway, Anxiety was gnawing at my stomach. Jessica parked behind me, and we walked into the house together. "I need to call Tom," I said, setting my purse down with shaking hands. "I need to explain what's been happening and warn him in case Sarah tries to contact him." "Good idea," Jessica said. "And Mom, don't apologize for being manipulated. Just explain what happened." I dialed Tom's number, my heart pounding as it rang. When he picked up, his voice was warm, but concerned. "Margaret, I was just thinking about you. Are you okay? I got the strangest call from Sarah about 20 minutes ago." My stomach dropped. "Oh no, Tom, I'm so sorry. What did she tell you?" "She said you'd had some kind of mental health crisis, and that I should be prepared for you to call me with wild accusations about her. She said you were becoming paranoid and might try to turn your friends against her." His voice was puzzled. "It was really odd. She kept insisting that anything you told me couldn't be trusted because you weren't thinking clearly." Jessica, who was sitting close enough to hear, rolled her eyes and made a disgusted sound. "Tom," I said carefully, "did that seem strange to you? The timing of her call, I mean?" "Extremely strange. Margaret, we've been friends for 15 years. I know when you're having a hard time, and I know how you handle stress. What she was describing didn't sound like you at all." His voice grew more serious. "What's really going on?" I took a deep breath and started from the beginning. I told him about the gradual isolation, the way Sarah had interpreted his invitations as mere politeness, how she'd convinced me that I was becoming a burden to everyone. I explained about the doctor's appointment and Sarah's attempt to have me hospitalized based on lies. Tom listened without interrupting, but I could hear his breathing change as I talked. "Margaret," he said finally, his voice tight with anger, "I invited you to my birthday dinner 3 times. Each time you seemed excited initially, then called back within a day to cancel, saying you didn't want to impose. I thought something was wrong, but when I asked, you just said you were having some health issues and needed to take things slowly. Sarah told me you were just being nice, that you'd told her privately that you hoped I wouldn't actually come because it would change the dynamic of the evening. That's complete nonsense. I never said anything like that to her, and I was disappointed every time you canceled. I even asked if there was something I could do to make it easier for you to come." Jessica leaned closer to the phone. "Hi, Tom. It's Jessica. Did Sarah suggest that Mom was having memory problems or making poor decisions?" "Yes, actually. She mentioned several times that she was worried about Margaret's judgment, that she seemed to be forgetting things and not taking care of herself properly. She made it sound like she was stepping in to help because no one else was paying attention." I closed my eyes, feeling the full scope of Sarah's manipulation settling over me like a heavy blanket. "Tom, I'm so sorry. I let her convince me that I was losing my friends, my independence, my ability to think clearly. I started doubting every social interaction, every decision." "Don't apologize," he said firmly. "This isn't your fault. But Margaret, I'm worried about what happens next. Someone who goes to this much trouble to control another person doesn't usually just give up when confronted." As if summoned by his words, my doorbell rang. Jessica and I looked at each other, then moved to the front window. Sarah's car was in my driveway again, and she was standing at my front door with what looked like a small suitcase. "She's back," I whispered to Tom. "She's at my front door with a suitcase." "Don't answer it," Tom said immediately. "And don't let her in. I'm coming over." "Tom, you don't need to—" "Yes, I do. This has gone way beyond a simple friendship issue. I'll be there in 15 minutes. The doorbell rang again, followed by Sarah's voice calling through the door. "Margaret, I know you're in there. I saw Jessica's car. We need to talk about what just happened. I think there's been a terrible misunderstanding." Jessica moved protectively between me and the door. Mom, do not let her in. Whatever she's planning, that suitcase suggests she intends to stay and really take control of your life. The doorbell continued ringing, and Sarah's voice grew more insistent. Margaret, I'm not leaving until we work this out. I've already canceled my other commitments for the week. I'm going to stay here and help you through this crisis, whether you think you want help or not. I stared at the door, finally understanding the true extent of what I'd been dealing with. Sarah hadn't just been manipulating me. She'd been planning to move in and take over my life completely. And now, she was making her final move. The sound of Sarah's voice through the door sent a chill through me that had nothing to do with the weather. I found myself backing away from the entrance, my heart hammering as I processed what she'd just said. She'd canceled her other commitments for the week. She'd brought a suitcase. This wasn't a casual visit or even an attempt to smooth things over. This was a calculated move to insert herself permanently into my life. Mom, sit down, Jessica said softly, guiding me to the couch. You look pale. I sank into the cushions, my mind reeling. How had I missed the signs for so long? All those times Sarah had suggested I wasn't thinking clearly. All the ways she'd gradually positioned herself as my caregiver and decision-maker. The phone call to Dr. Martinez hadn't been an impulsive act. It was part of a larger plan to establish herself as my guardian, my protector, the person everyone would turn to when they had concerns about me. Margaret, I can hear you moving around in there, Sarah called through the door. I know you're upset, but I'm not the enemy here. I'm the one person who's been looking out for you when everyone else was too busy with their own lives. I winced at the familiar manipulation, the way she twisted concern into guilt, made her interference sound like sacrifice. For months, I'd been apologizing to her, thanking her for her help, feeling grateful that someone cared enough to worry about me. Now I could see how she'd used that gratitude as a leash. She's trying to make you feel guilty even now? Jessica observed, settling beside me on the couch. Did you hear how she threw in that dig about everyone else being too busy? She's still trying to isolate you, make you think she's your only real friend. The doorbell rang again, 3 sharp bursts that made me jump. Then Sarah's voice, louder now, with an edge of irritation creeping in. Margaret, this is ridiculous. We're both adults. Open the door so we can talk about this like reasonable people. I stared at the door, finally seeing Sarah's behavior for what it truly was. The way she'd slowly inserted herself into every aspect of my life, gradually taking over decisions I was perfectly capable of making myself. The subtle undermining of my other relationships, the constant suggestions that I was forgetting things or making poor choices. The phone calls to my doctor behind my back, creating a narrative of mental decline that could have had devastating consequences. I feel so stupid, I whispered to Jessica. How did I let this happen? How did I not see what she was doing? Because she was good at it, Jessica replied firmly. This wasn't obvious manipulation, Mom. This was sophisticated, gradual, and she used your natural kindness against you. She made you doubt yourself so slowly that you didn't notice it happening. The knocking started again, more insistent this time. Margaret, I'm not leaving. I've cleared my entire schedule to be here for you. The least you can do is let me explain what really happened with Dr. Martinez. You're only getting one side of the story. I felt a flash of anger at that, the implication that there was another side to her calling my doctor and lying about my mental state. What possible justification could there be for that level of betrayal? She's getting frustrated, Jessica noted quietly. Her voice is changing. The sweet, concerned friend act is slipping. I nodded, hearing it too. The patient, caring tone Sarah usually used with me was being replaced by something sharper, more demanding. It was like watching a mask slip, revealing something underneath that made me deeply uncomfortable. The sound of footsteps on my front porch told me Sarah was pacing now, and I could hear her muttering to herself, though I couldn't make out the words. The image of her out there with her suitcase, planning to move herself into my home whether I wanted her there or not, made my skin crawl. What if she doesn't leave? I asked Jessica. What if she just stays out there? Then we call the police, Jessica said without hesitation. Mom, you need to understand. What she did with Dr. Martinez, this whole pattern of behavior, it's not normal friendship concern. This is something else entirely, and you don't owe her anything. Not explanations, not access to your home, not another chance to manipulate you. I looked at my daughter, seeing the protective anger in her eyes, and felt a surge of gratitude that she'd been here to witness Sarah's behavior firsthand. Without that, I might have convinced myself I was overreacting, might have opened the door and let Sarah talk her way back into my life. The knocking stopped suddenly, and I heard Sarah's footsteps moving away from the door. For a moment, I felt relief, thinking she might finally be leaving. But then, I heard the unmistakable sound of my back gate opening. Jessica and I looked at each other in alarm. She's going around back, Jessica said, already moving toward the kitchen windows. My heart sank as I realized Sarah knew about the spare key I kept under the planter by my back door. I'd told her about it months ago, back when I still trusted her, back when her offers to help seemed genuine instead of predatory. The spare key, I said, and Jessica's face went pale. We both headed for the back door, Jessica reaching it first and quickly turning the deadbolt. Through the kitchen window, I could see Sarah approaching with her suitcase, her expression determined and somehow cold in a way I'd never seen before. She tried the door handle, then knocked on the glass. Margaret, I know you can see me. This is getting out of hand. I'm trying to help you, but you're making this much more difficult than it needs to be. I stood frozen, watching this woman I'd considered my closest friend try to force her way into my home, and finally understood the true scope of what I'd been dealing with. This wasn't about friendship or concern. This was about control, and Sarah wasn't going to give it up easily. The sound of a car pulling into my driveway made both Sarah and me turn toward the front of the house. Through the kitchen window, I could see her face change, a flicker of something that might have been panic crossing her features before she composed herself again. But as footsteps approached my front door, I realized our confrontation was just beginning. The footsteps on my front porch were deliberate and measured. Through the living room window, Jessica peered out carefully. Mom, it's Dr. Martinez, she called back to me, her voice tight with surprise. My stomach dropped. Of all the times for him to show up, this had to be the worst possible moment. Sarah's face through the back door glass had transformed completely. Gone was the cold determination, replaced by what looked almost like satisfaction. Margaret, Sarah called through the door, her tone suddenly shifting to concerned and gentle. Dr. Martinez is here. He's probably worried about you after our conversation. You should really let us both in so we can all talk this through together. The manipulation in her voice was so obvious now that I wondered how I'd missed it for so long. She was positioning herself as part of the solution, as someone who belonged in this conversation with my doctor. Don't you dare, Jessica said firmly, reading my expression. Do not let her frame this situation. The knocking at the front door continued, and I heard Dr. Martinez call out, Margaret, I wanted to check on you after some concerning information was brought to my attention. Could we speak for a few minutes? My hands were shaking as I realized the impossible position I was in. If I didn't answer the door, it would only confirm whatever story Sarah had told him. But if I let him in while she was still here, she'd somehow manage to control the narrative. I need to talk to him, I told Jessica, but not with her here. Sarah, I called through the back door, surprised by the steadiness in my own voice. You need to leave my property immediately. Dr. Martinez and I will speak privately. But Margaret, I'm the one who contacted him out of concern for you, Sarah replied, and I could hear her moving closer to the door. I think it would be helpful if I could explain what I've been observing. Dr. Martinez, I'm Sarah, Margaret's friend. I'm the one who called your office. I heard Dr. Martinez's footsteps move from the front door toward the backyard, and my heart sank. This was exactly what Sarah wanted. To be included, to be seen as the concerned friend who'd brought in professional help. Mom, go to the front door, Jessica whispered urgently. Get to him before she can spin this her way. I moved quickly through the living room, unlocking the front door just as Dr. Martinez was rounding the corner toward the back of the house. When he saw me, he stopped and walked back toward the front porch. Margaret, thank you. I was concerned after receiving that call today. Your friend Sarah seemed very worried about some things you'd allegedly said about harming yourself. Behind him, I could see Sarah approaching with her suitcase, that same composed expression on her face. She'd managed to position herself right where she wanted to be, in the middle of a conversation between me and my doctor. Dr. Martinez, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I need to tell you that Sarah has been... Dr. Martinez, Sarah interrupted smoothly, stepping up onto my porch uninvited. I'm so glad you came. Margaret has been isolating herself, and when she started talking about not wanting to wake up anymore, I knew I had to reach out for professional help. I've been staying with her to make sure she's safe. The lie was so brazen, so confidently delivered, that for a moment I was speechless. Jessica appeared beside me in the doorway, her face flushed with anger. That's completely untrue, Jessica said sharply. Sarah, you haven't been staying here, and my mother never said anything about harming herself. What you're doing right now is exactly why we don't want you here. Dr. Martinez looked between the three of us, clearly trying to assess the situation. I could see him taking in Sarah's suitcase, her positioning on my porch as if she belonged there, and the obvious tension between us. Perhaps we should all sit down and discuss this calmly, he suggested. Margaret, may we come inside? She is not coming into my house, I said firmly, pointing at Sarah. Dr. Martinez, I'm happy to speak with you, but Sarah needs to leave my property first. Sarah's mask slipped for just a moment, and I saw a flash of real anger cross her features before she composed herself again. Margaret, I understand you're upset, but pushing away the people who care about you is exactly what I was worried about, she said, turning to Dr. Martinez with a concerned expression. This kind of paranoid thinking, combined with the suicidal ideation, is why I felt I had to intervene. The way she used clinical terms, the way she positioned herself as the rational observer while painting me as unstable, made my blood run cold. This was exactly what she'd planned, to have this conversation in front of my doctor, where her lies would carry the weight of medical concern. But as Dr. Martinez studied Sarah's face, then looked at me and Jessica, I realized he was seeing something that gave me a glimmer of hope. Dr. Martinez looked at Sarah with a measured expression that was becoming increasingly skeptical. I have to say, this situation is concerning to me, but perhaps not in the way you intended, Sarah. The shift in his tone was subtle but unmistakable. Sarah's confident demeanor faltered slightly as she realized the conversation wasn't going according to her script. "I'm sorry?" she said, her voice taking on a sharper edge. "In my 15 years of practice," Dr. Martinez continued, "I've learned to recognize when family dynamics become unhealthy. What I'm observing here raises some questions about boundaries and manipulation tactics." I felt Jessica's hand squeeze my shoulder supportively as we watched Sarah's face cycle through emotions she was struggling to control. "Dr. Martinez," Sarah said, attempting to regain her composure, "I think you're misunderstanding the severity of Margaret's condition. When someone talks about not wanting to be here anymore..." "Stop," I said firmly. "Just stop lying." "Dr. Martinez, I never said anything remotely like that. What I did say to Jessica yesterday was that I was tired of feeling like I had to walk on eggshells around Sarah's constant drama and manipulation." "I said I didn't want to deal with her behavior anymore." Dr. Martinez nodded slowly. "That makes considerably more sense, given what I'm witnessing right now. Sarah, showing up at someone's home uninvited with luggage after they've asked for space is not appropriate concern. It's boundary violation." Sarah's mask was slipping further now, and I could see the anger she'd been hiding behind her fake worry. "This is ridiculous. Margaret, you called me crying just 2 days ago about how lonely you were. You begged me to come visit, and now you're acting like I'm some kind of stalker." "That's another lie," Jessica said immediately. "Mom doesn't even have your current phone number. We had to ask Tom how to reach you when we needed to return your things last month." The mention of Tom seemed to hit Sarah like a physical blow. For a moment, her careful facade crumbled completely, and I saw something that looked almost desperate in her eyes. "Fine," she snapped, her voice losing all pretense of concern. "Maybe I did interpret things differently than they happened, but I was trying to help Margaret. Everything I do is because I care about our friendship." Dr. Martinez observed this outburst with professional interest. "Sarah, I think you might benefit from speaking with someone about healthy relationship boundaries. What you've described today sounds like a pattern that could be harmful to both you and Margaret." "I don't need therapy," Sarah said quickly, her voice getting higher. "I need my friend to stop turning everyone against me. First Tom, then Jessica, now even her doctor. Can't you see what she's doing?" The irony of her words hung in the air. She was accusing me of exactly what she'd been doing, trying to turn people against someone else. But unlike her carefully planned manipulation, my family and doctor were simply responding to her actual behavior. "Sarah," I said quietly, "I want you to take your suitcase and leave my property. If you don't go willingly, Dr. Martinez can call someone to escort you." "You can't be serious," she said, looking between the three of us as if she couldn't believe her plan had backfired so completely. "I'm absolutely serious," I replied. "And if you contact me again, or show up here again, or try to call my doctor again with false information, I will take legal action." Sarah stared at me for a long moment, and I could see her trying to figure out if there was any way to salvage the situation. Finally, she grabbed her suitcase handle with such force that it tilted and nearly fell over. "This isn't over, Margaret," she said, her voice now completely stripped of its earlier fake sweetness. "You think you can just throw away 20 years of friendship? You'll regret this." But as she turned to leave, dragging her suitcase behind her, Tom appeared at the end of my driveway, and the expression on his face suggested he'd heard more of that conversation than Sarah realized. Sarah froze at the sight of Tom, her grip tightening on the suitcase handle. The angry mask she'd worn just moments before flickered, and I watched her try to calculate whether she could still salvage this situation. "Tom?" she said, forcing brightness back into her voice. I was just leaving. Margaret and I had a little misunderstanding, but I'm sure we'll work it out. Tom walked closer, his expression unreadable. I heard what you said about this not being over. That sounded like a threat. Don't be ridiculous, Sarah laughed, but it came out strained. We've known each other for years. I would never threaten Margaret. I was just upset because she's obviously not thinking clearly right now. Actually, Tom said, stopping a few feet away from her, I think Margaret is thinking more clearly than she has in months, probably because she doesn't have you whispering poison in her ear every day. Dr. Martinez stepped forward slightly. Tom, I appreciate your concern for Margaret, but perhaps we should let Sarah leave peacefully. Oh, I want her to leave, Tom said, his eyes never leaving Sarah's face. But I also want her to understand something first. I've been watching this friendship for years, Sarah. Watching you call Margaret at all hours when something goes wrong in your life. Watching you show up uninvited when you need something. Watching you guilt her into dropping everything for your latest crisis. Sarah's composure cracked further. That's not how it was. Margaret wanted to help me. Friends help each other. Friends don't lie to doctors about suicide threats, Jessica said sharply. Friends don't pack a suitcase and invite themselves to stay indefinitely when someone is trying to heal. I never lied, Sarah protested, but her voice wavered. I was concerned about things Margaret said. Maybe I misunderstood, but my intentions were good. Tom shook his head slowly. Your intentions are always about you, Sarah. When Margaret got that promotion 2 years ago, you spent the entire celebration dinner talking about how your boss was overlooking you. When she started dating David, you found reasons why he wasn't good enough every single time we got together. When her dad was in the hospital, you called her crying about your own family drama. That's not fair, Sarah said, but she was backing toward her car now. Friendships go through rough patches. Margaret never said she had a problem with any of that. Because you never gave her space to say it, Tom replied. Every time she tried to set a boundary, you'd cry or get angry or find some crisis that needed her immediate attention. Dr. Martinez was taking notes, and I could see her professional curiosity about this dynamic playing out in real time. Sarah, what Tom is describing sounds like what we call emotional enmeshment. It's when someone becomes so dependent on a relationship that they can't recognize where they end and the other person begins. Don't psychoanalyze me, Sarah snapped. I don't need some stranger telling me how to be a friend. But maybe you do, I said quietly. Because what you did today wasn't friendship, Sarah. It was manipulation. You tried to have me committed based on things I never said, just so you could control my recovery process? Sarah's face flushed red. I never said the word committed. I just thought you needed more support than you were getting. Support that you would provide by moving in here? Jessica said flatly. How convenient. There's nothing wrong with friends helping each other through difficult times, Sarah insisted, but she was fumbling with her car keys now. Tom crossed his arms. Tell me something, Sarah. When was the last time you helped Margaret with something that didn't also benefit you somehow? The question hung in the air, and I watched Sarah's face cycle through several expressions as she tried to come up with an answer. I don't have to stand here and be interrogated by people who clearly don't understand our friendship, she finally said. Our friendship, I repeated. That's the problem right there. You keep saying our friendship, but you're the only one who gets to define what that means. You're the only one whose needs matter. You're the only one whose feelings are considered. Sarah stared at me, and for a moment I saw something that might have been genuine hurt in her eyes. "Margaret, we've been friends since college. Doesn't that mean anything to you?" "It means I wasted 20 years trying to be the friend you needed, instead of asking whether you were the friend I needed," I said. "And the answer to that question is no. You're not." The hurt in her eyes flickered and died, replaced by something colder. "Fine. But don't come crying to me when you realize what you've thrown away. Don't call me when your family gets tired of dealing with your problems and you need someone who actually understands you." "I won't," I said simply. Sarah looked at Tom, then at Jessica, then at Dr. Martinez, as if hoping someone would intervene on her behalf. When no one did, she yanked open her car door. "You'll regret this," she said again, but the words sounded hollow now instead of threatening. As she backed out of the driveway with more speed than necessary, Tom walked over to where Jessica, Dr. Martinez, and I were standing. "Well," he said, "that was overdue by about 15 years. Dr. Martinez closed her notebook. "Margaret, I have to ask, do you think she'll actually stay away?" I watched Sarah's car disappear around the corner, but instead of feeling relief, a chill ran down my spine. Because I knew Sarah better than anyone, and I knew that when she felt cornered, she didn't retreat. She regrouped. "She won't stay away," I said, answering Dr. Martinez's question honestly. "Sarah doesn't handle rejection well. She'll find another angle." Tom frowned. "What do you mean?" I rubbed my temples, feeling a familiar headache building. "She's done this before. Not exactly this, but when things don't go her way, she escalates. In college, when I started dating someone she didn't approve of, she couldn't just let it go. She had to prove she was right by finding every flaw in the relationship and pointing them out until I broke up with him." "That's concerning," Dr. Martinez said, "especially given what she attempted today." Jessica shifted uncomfortably. "Mom, you don't think she'd actually try to hurt you or anything, do you?" The question made my stomach clench. "No, not physically. But Sarah's weapon has always been emotional manipulation. She knows exactly which buttons to push because I've spent 20 years telling her where they are." We all stood there in the driveway for another moment, the afternoon sun beating down on us. It felt surreal to be having this conversation outside my house, as if we were discussing the weather instead of the end of a 2-decade friendship. "Let's go inside," Tom suggested. "No point giving the neighbors a show." Once we were settled in the living room, Dr. Martinez reopened her notebook. "Margaret, I think it's important we discuss some practical steps. Sarah demonstrated today that she's willing to lie to medical professionals about your mental state. That's not just a betrayal of trust. It's potentially dangerous." "What kind of steps?" I asked. "First, I'm going to make detailed notes about today's incident in your file. If Sarah attempts this again with me or any other healthcare provider, there will be a clear record of her previous deception." Tom leaned forward. "Can she do that? Just call up Margaret's doctor and make claims?" "Unfortunately, there's no law preventing someone from expressing concern about another person's welfare," Dr. Martinez explained. "However, any competent professional should verify such claims directly with the patient before taking action. I should have done that immediately instead of coming here based solely on her word." I appreciated her honesty, even though the whole situation still made me angry. "So, what happens if she tries this with someone else? Another doctor? Or the police?" Jessica finished grimly. "Mom, what if she calls in a welfare check or something?" The thought hadn't occurred to me, but now that Jessica had voiced it, I could absolutely see Sarah doing exactly that. It would fit her pattern perfectly, giving her the moral high ground while forcing me into a position where I'd have to defend my mental state to strangers. We document everything, Dr. Martinez said firmly. Every contact, every incident. If there's a pattern of harassment, that becomes relevant information. Is that what this is? Tom asked. Harassment? I considered the question carefully. Sarah's behavior today felt different from our usual dynamic. More aggressive, more desperate. I think it might be. She seemed genuinely shocked that I was standing up to her. Like the possibility that I might have my own opinion had never occurred to her. Because in her mind, your opinions should align with hers, Dr. Martinez observed. That's a common trait in controlling relationships. The controlling person genuinely believes they know what's best for everyone else. Jessica curled up in the corner of the couch, looking younger than her 26 years. I never liked her, even when I was little. She always made me feel like I was in the way when she came over. You never said anything, I said, surprised. You seemed to think she was important, so I figured I was wrong about her. But she always acted like she owned our house when she was here. Like we were the guests, and she belonged here more than we did. Tom nodded slowly. I remember that. She'd rearrange things in the kitchen when she helped with dinner parties. Move your stuff around like her way was better. It struck me how many small violations I'd accepted over the years, dismissing them as quirks or trying to convince myself they came from a place of caring. But hearing Tom and Jessica describe their observations, I realized they'd seen something I'd been too close to recognize. I think I stayed friends with her because it was easier than dealing with the fallout if I didn't, I admitted. Every time I tried to set a boundary, she'd get so hurt and upset that I'd end up apologizing and backing down. That's emotional manipulation, Dr. Martinez said matter-of-factly. Making you responsible for managing her emotions when she doesn't get her way. The house phone rang, and we all froze. It was an old landline that barely anyone used anymore, mostly just telemarketers and... Sarah? I said. Jessica jumped up. I'll get it. No, I said quickly. Let it go to voicemail. We sat in silence listening to the rings, 4 of them before the machine picked up. Sarah's voice filled the living room, tight with barely controlled anger. Margaret, I know you're there. I just want you to know that I'm not giving up on our friendship just because you're having some kind of breakdown. I'm going to give you time to calm down and think about what you're throwing away, but I'm not going to let you make the biggest mistake of your life without a fight. I'll call you tomorrow when you've had a chance to come to your senses. The machine clicked off, and the silence that followed felt heavy. Well, Tom said finally, I guess we have our answer about whether she'll stay away. Dr. Martinez was writing in her notebook again. Margaret, I want you to save that message. Don't delete it. If there are more calls like that, save those too. You really think this is going to escalate? I asked, though I already knew the answer. I think Sarah is used to getting her way with you, and she's not going to accept this change easily, Dr. Martinez replied. The good news is that you're not alone in this. You have Tom and Jessica, and you have professional support. You don't have to handle whatever comes next by yourself. Jessica came over and sat beside me on the couch. Mom, are you okay? I mean, really okay? Today was a lot. I took her hand, surprised by how steady my own felt. You know what? I think I actually am okay. For the first time in years, I feel like I can breathe properly. Like there was this weight I'd been carrying that I didn't even realize was there until it was gone. Even with the phone call? Tom asked. Even with the phone call. Because now I can see it for what it is. It's not concern for my well-being. It's anger that I won't do what she wants anymore. Dr. Martinez closed her notebook and looked at me with something that might have been pride. Margaret, 6 months ago, You were afraid to disagree with Sarah about where to have lunch. Today you stood up to her attempt to have you involuntarily committed. That's remarkable progress. It doesn't feel remarkable. It feels like something I should have done years ago. Most people never do it at all, she said gently. They spend their entire lives letting other people make decisions for them because it seems easier. But you chose differently, even when it was hard. As Dr. Martinez gathered her things to leave, I walked her to the door. Thank you, I said. Not just for today, but for believing me when I said the call wasn't accurate. Actually, she said, pausing on the front steps. I have a confession. I didn't believe her completely. Something about the call felt off. Sarah was very insistent that I see you immediately, and she had very specific ideas about what kind of treatment you needed. That's unusual for someone who's genuinely just concerned about a friend's welfare. So you came here to check on me, not to have me hospitalized? I came to assess the situation for myself, which is what I should have told Sarah I'd do instead of letting her think I was going to act on her word alone. After she left, the three of us ordered pizza and spent the evening talking about everything except Sarah. It felt deliberately normal, like we were all trying to reclaim the peace of our own home after it had been invaded by drama. But as I got ready for bed that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that today was just the beginning. Sarah's parting words echoed in my mind. She wasn't giving up, and knowing her as well as I did, that meant she was already planning her next move. The question was, would I be ready for it?